Wisconsin is going back to work.
I'm Steve Walders.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
This is Rewind, WisconsinEye's summary of the week in the Capitol. The number one story this week was what's called a document dump. Thousands of emails and other court documents released about the prosecution of former Scott Walker aide when he was county executive, Kelly Rindfleisch. A few of us spent many hours. JR, before you weigh in on this, I just want to make 3 points. Number one, County Executive Scott Walker, now Governor Scott Walker, and I think every other politician who's either a D or an R, they go back and forth doing government work and doing political work. I was just struck, one quick email Scott Walker wrote on March 27th, where he said, "We need to continue to keep me out of this story," which is a story on patients sexually assaulting other patients and how the Milwaukee County mental health system works. So 24/7, it's politics in public. Point number one. Point number two, Walker has repeatedly said, "I had a policy, thou shalt not, my aide shalt not campaign on government time." It was not enforced. I mean, the emails show that. And finally, point three, the two things that really I learned new. Number one, the Inner Circle email sent to Kelly Rindfleisch by Deputy Cindy Archer welcomed the Inner Circle, in which she says she uses this private laptop system, quote, quite a bit, close quote, to communicate with SKW, Scott Walker, and Chief of Staff Tom Nardelli. And the other thing I knew, the irony, and it's little, I don't think it's anything more than irony. The day before the election of 2010 to elect Walker as the next governor, a judge signs off on expanding the investigation to four key aides around then County Exec Walker. Those are my 3 points, JR. What struck you about the documents?
Well, there's no smoking gun, but they're embarrassing. Going in, the expectation I had was that there wasn't going to be anything that would really put Walker in legal danger, because if they had something like that, they would have already charged him, right? I mean, that's kind of the expectation I guess we had. And so you saw things, though, that clearly raised some questions about what Walker was doing and what he knew. The prosecutors clearly thought that Scott Walker knew about this secret email system and network in his office. But it appears they couldn't get to the level of putting a sitting governor on a stand and trying to charge him. And maybe what they did didn't rise to breaking the law at all. But for Walker, I mean, it's embarrassing to have this stuff out there. It's embarrassing to have your aides making racially insensitive jokes and emails. It raises questions of the people he surrounds himself with. Again, in light of the various people who have to step down or been fired because of, inflammatory comments about Hispanics, about all these things. So it's just an embarrassing story. But as a will he lose in 2014 because of it? Probably not. I mean, he survived a recall election in 2012 with Moses out there already. So it's not a big danger electorally right now for him.
Well, how do you think the Dems will use it? I mean, I was struck, George Soros, the billionaire who backs Hillary Clinton, he set up a website and devoted some staffers, because when you're a billionaire you can do that, just to go through these documents. But how do you think his opponents will use this?
Oh, I'm sure they'll jump on it. I'm sure there'll be campaign ads. I'm sure they're going to have websites devoted to Scott Walker and John Doe. I mean, those things will be out there, but they're more about 2016 than they are about 2014. And really, the real danger for Walker is not this. It's John Doe 2, which we don't really know much about yet. We know it's ongoing. We've seen reports that it involves questions of coordination between conservative groups and Walker's recall election campaign. If something comes out of that, maybe it's something new. We don't know. And that's the great unknown for Scott Walker, legally speaking, right now.
Well, so far, Washington-based news organizations are kind of shrugging. I mean, the headline in Politico right now called it a snoozer of a scandal. Certainly not equal to the Bridgegate controversy that dogs the New Jersey governor, another potential candidate for president.
Yeah, well, I mean, Christie's star is on the wane a little bit. He was like the it candidate for a while. Now all of a sudden he's not so hot anymore. Somebody has to fill that vacuum, and it's so far been Scott Walker. I mean, he fits the bill of what some Republicans are looking for nationally, of a governor, not somebody from D.C., got conservative credentials, can appeal to moderates in some ways. So now he's got his time in the sun, and it gets hot sometimes. And these guys are coming in, and they're taking their first look at Scott Walker nationally, going, okay, what do we know about this guy? And this is kind of like a first impression, if you will, for the national media and national readers about Scott Walker, the candidate.
Yeah, you have this gap. Much of this stuff, as you just pointed out, was known to those of us in Wisconsin, and it was it's been out there for months, maybe a year. but now you have the Washington media looking at thousands of emails. I have two follow-up questions before we're done with this subject, JR. The governor went to Washington for the RGA. Do we know when he's going to be back, and do we know when the first time he will take questions from Wisconsin reporters following the document dump?
He's out there for the long weekend. Not sure when he's going to be back to do a public event, but hopefully try and catch him next week.
And then second question, why is there silence from the Democratic candidate Mary Burke? We haven't heard, you and I haven't heard anything from her yet.
Good question, but I mean, really, if you're in her position, why get involved? Other people are skewing Scott Walker right now, going after him. If you don't have to get involved, don't dirty yourself up. Let other people take him down.
JR, the Journal-Sentinel had 11 reporters going through these emails. How did you run a newsroom? How did you decide? Have you and your people been through all of them? I'm just curious.
God, most of them, yeah. We just divide up the work and kind of go through. I mean, the transcript of the court, the request, if you will, to expand the doe, yes. That really is where the meat of the stuff was at. I mean, most of the emails were, as Robin Voss put this week, high school-y, a lot of gossipy stuff, and it was kind of titillating, but the meat was in that transcript of what they had and what they were looking for.
Interesting. I'm sorry to say I've only been through 2,000 pages. But one more thing on that subject. You remember the caucus scandal 12 years ago? You and I got documents like this, hard copies we had to pour through. Now, I'm just amazed. All of the 27,000, however many, are up on the internet for anybody.
And that's part of why it's a national story, because national people can grab this disk and load it up, and they can post these emails directly to the web and have them out there for everybody to see. So it's kind of like a little bit extra oomph, if you will, if the national group's looking at this stuff.
Well, congratulations on reading a lot more pages than I have. Meanwhile, in other news, Joint Finance Committee tweaks and clears the governor's $500 million package of property income tax cuts, clearing it for the Senate vote March 4. Assembly leaders say it's a deal. Give us the backstory on that.
It was Rob Coles, essentially. Rob, a Republican from Green Bay, was looking for more concessions to lower the structural deficit. He got some, and that's what cleared the way for a path forward. Now, some Republicans aren't real happy about the lapse. They think it's kind of an odd move in light of a surplus, if you will. But hey, if that's what I have to do to get it done, I'm going to get it done. That's basically it. Yeah.
And it's a deal. The other thing is, this is my nominee for Surprise of the Week. I had thought a few weeks ago when the governor said, I want a commission to study the whole issue of Common Core standards, that issue was dead there. I mean, that's where it was going to stay. But now it turns out the governor and GOP leaders, they're drafting a more ambitious bill, 15-member board, 6 of whom would be named by the governor, 4 by the legislative leaders, 5 including Tony Evers, to recommend standards to Evers. But here's the bottom line. If the legislature didn't like those standards, they could go back and adopt the board's recommendations. What's your take on that?
The backers are looking for something as an alternative to Common Core, and so this allows them to say we have state-based, Wisconsin-drawn standards. They can point to that. The issue for Tony Evers, DPI superintendent, is the politics involved in education. Now, let's be honest, there's always politics in education. But to him, you open the door to evolution. Should that be taught in science classes? Creationism, should that be taught in science classes? That debate being on the floor of the Assembly and the Senate every session, and the people in power dictating, whoever wins the governor's office, having a huge say in dictating what kids learn. Is that the right path forward for Wisconsin?
But Tony Evers just sat in that chair and said, the Constitution of Wisconsin, I'm a constitutional officer, puts me in charge of K-12 issues. Lawsuit time, potentially?
Absolutely.
Do you see this bill getting through the Senate?
They're trying to rely. Leah Vuckermer's been pushing that bill. It's new. They've got a couple days left to be on the floor. So what I'm hearing essentially is they're going to look to Leah for leadership, but can it get through? I don't know. It's a fractured caucus.
Okay. Time for Wisconsin politics stock picks. Who's rising? Mixed, falling?
Rob Coles. Some Republicans will tell you that what he got wasn't worth the pain he went through. But if you look at what Rob did, he stood up to these guys and said, no, I need this, and they gave it to him. It shows the power of being a caucus of one in the state Senate, where you have 18 Republicans, but Dale Schultz is kind of running off in the sunset. You really have 17. They need every one of them for every vote on every bill, and Rob was important on that.
Okay. And next?
You got to look at Tom Petri. Interesting move. He's under fire because of his ownership of the stock in the Oshkosh Corporation. He asked to be investigated. If he asked to be investigated, knowing the answer that investigation is going to find, great move. If it comes back and he finds anything dicey, it could blow up in his face. And there's still some questions looking at a primary challenge this year. Unlikely, but still possible.
And falling.
Governor Walker, the danger, again, is not 2014. It's the national media coming in and giving this impression of Scott Walker and raising questions about his character. That's not great for him. Otherwise, it's mostly embarrassing emails and stuff that he will likely survive in the court of public opinion. For conservatives, this is, total bogus investigation that's got nothing on him and has been totally overblown. For liberals, they hate Scott Walker, and this makes them hate him even more. But in the end, it's not going to change the election in 2014. It's more about 2016 for him.
That's Rewind for this week. I'm Steve Walders.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
Thank you.